It's movie night, and we're back with the last final M. Night Shyamalan from best to worst films he's directed. My personal list, this is number 10, dead last, the end of this series, The Last Airbender. Spoilers ahead, let's get into the cast. This one stars Noah Ringer as Aang, the Avatar, Nicola Peltz as Katara, Dave Patel as Zuko, and Jason Rathbone as Sokka. I think on most people's list, if you have an M. Night Shyamalan from best to worst list, this would end up dead last on probably 99% of those people's lists, unless you are just a diehard M. Night Shyamalan fan for a certain reason, and this one just happens to make it to your top. Nothing wrong with that. All films are made to be liked and disliked by people. That's why I love film. That's why we celebrate it, and that's why we talk about it. It's because film is both subjective and objective at times, but for the most part, we look at it through the lenses of what we like, and that's what makes films look good or look bad to certain people depending on who they are. This is one of those films where I just don't like it for a number of reasons, but because people bag on this movie so much, and because it is so bad, and because there are so many things to not like about this movie, and I'll talk about a few here. I am a positive person. I'm not gonna talk negative and bash this thing. I was thinking, how am I going to review this film, because there's just so many things wrong with it that it just come off to the point of why even review it. You can have it for 30 seconds and just say this film sucks and then turn it off. But I don't want to do that with this film, because for everything bad in life, there's always a good. For every negative, there's a positive. So I'm going to do something different with this review. I'm going to talk about all the positive things in this film, and I'm going to not talk about the negative stuff outside of a few, which I'm going to talk about right now. The glaring thing, first and foremost with negatives, is that this is based on the anime Avatar, The Last Airbender. But since the name Avatar obviously has been taken by James Cameron's big motion picture epic Avatar, they couldn't use that name. I guess they could. We would never know the legal ramifications of using Avatar, The Last Airbender. Maybe they just did it so they didn't confuse anybody with James Cameron's Avatar. So they just called this movie The Last Airbender. In my opinion, that was strike number one, because you've already told your fans that, hey, look, we couldn't even get the name Avatar now. We're just called The Last Airbender. Is that really a big deal? No, it's not. But to a lot of fans who love this stuff, and the ones you really need to get their butts in the seat and have word of mouth about this film, you don't want to start off by cutting off what this potential is, because essentially what you did when you said it wasn't Avatar, The Last Airbender, you just called it The Last Airbender. You're Hollywood standardizing this movie already, which a lot of people who love anime and comic book graphic novels to films and things like that, things that have to be translated to film. One of the things a lot of those fanboys don't like is that Hollywood fucks up their precious stories, their characters, their worlds. And I think a lot of people who love Avatar The Last Airbender, and there are millions of fans of this character. I have never been into it myself, but I understand why he is such a cultural icon to people who love this character of Avatar The Last Airbender. This whole franchise has done remarkably well, or there would not be a Hollywood movie about it to begin with. Negative number two, the acting is simply horrible, and I think a lot of it has to do with the script. It is a very boring, uninspired script, full of things that we've all seen before. The story is predictable. I say story in quotes because there isn't much of a story. This movie has no heart to it. There's nothing to it. There's no meat. There's no bones. There's nothing. It is I don't know what it is, but it's just not a film. It doesn't feel like it belongs in a film category. It is something that I can't even describe what it is, because it just does not work as a film. So that's pretty much my biggest issue with it. The acting, the casting, I feel is poor. I think everybody in this film did not perform at any level. It just does not work. Nothing works when it comes to the acting and the writing of the film, the screenplay, the directing. None of it works. It's just a jumbled spiderweb of horrible filmmaking. Now, that being said, let's get to the positives, because I think there are a lot of positives in this film. especially if you are a film of if you're a fan of things that are beyond our world and super fantasy land and things that you would never see in any other film, you will find in this film. Now, one of the things I did like about this film is that it is breathtakingly gorgeous. The special effects actually hold up pretty well. And the sound design, the special effects, the production design, the wardrobe, the score, all of that works. It's beautiful. The wardrobe is gorgeous. The way the cinematography of it, as far as the camera work goes, there are some very long takes doing some of these action sequences and some of the dialogue scenes, and in particular the fight scenes. The fight scenes, the choreography is not that breathtaking, but the way that the camera moves with it, it is beautiful. It works very well, and they blend in the special effects seamlessly with the martial arts and the big fight scenes and with the camera work. That's the most beautiful thing about this film, is that there are some nice action sequences in this film that work alone on its own, but it just doesn't fit in the film because the rest of the film doesn't measure up to the best parts of this film, which are the action sequences. And unfortunately, we don't get enough action in this film to make up for the fact that the dialogue and the screenplay and the pacing of this film is so boring and uninspired and leads to nowhere. You need those action sequences to keep us awake. And unfortunately, this movie goes on stretches where you will literally be falling asleep. And that's because it's just so boring. There's nothing to do in this world. It's all predicated on this boy being found and having figured out that he needs to put together the complete avatar, the complete airbender. He is the last of them who can control all the elements. Everything in this movie is based on elements. The element of water, fire, earth, wind. All those things make up people who can control these things. And there are factions. There's the fire faction. There's the water faction, the earth faction. All those are in there. And you have one person who can control all of them. And that's this little boy named Ong. And he's not a very good actor. So that's the problem. When you have the lead character and he is not very good as a lead character, he is good in some moments where I feel like he works, but that's when he's not speaking and he's doing something action based. Whenever this little boy is required to talk and interact with the other characters who it's just bad. You can't get over the fact that what they're saying is so silly to begin with, even if you had good actors. But you take the silly dialogue and you put it with people who couldn't deliver the best dialogue ever written properly, that's a problem. This film takes itself a little too seriously sometimes, but I sat back and tried to watch it just through the lenses of having fun, and there is some fun to be had in here. I think the editing of the score been put in works really well. When the music score just comes in at these certain moments, and it just elevates each scene, which needs all the elevation they can get. The score does help with that, because I found myself when the score would come in and out of certain sections, especially when it would build during some of the bigger sequences in the film, I thought that was very well put together and edited properly into the film. The sound mixing, the sound design, that's all on point in this film. But you get that in any M. Night Shyamalan film. You know you're going to get good cinematography, good sound design, great music, and you get that all again in this one. That's no different than any other M. Night Shyamalan film. His camera work, again, it is one of the keys to this movie where I felt like had it been taken more seriously and put together nicely, I think that what he was trying to do, M. Night Shyamalan I'm talking about, what he was trying to do with this film would have worked. It just feels like there was just no overall vision from the actors, all the department heads, from the studio to M. Night, to all these people involved in this film. It just doesn't seem like everybody was on the same page, because there's just so many inconsistencies in this film. Scenes end very abruptly. But the good thing about it is, I'm trying to stay on the positives here. The good thing about it is that you get to go and see a lot of different locations based on these elements. And that is cool. Again, if you're a fan of fantasy, this is a good film, because I love elements. Anything involving elemental things like fire and water and earth and wind and all these things. Whenever you have people controlling it with magic and having people shooting fire out of their hands and ice out of their hands and and having, the elements coming together, and you have these different factions of people. And you have all these kingdoms like the Fire Nation, you have the Northern Air Temple, you have the Southern Earth Kingdom, you have all these elemental kingdoms and nations. All that stuff works. But what it made me want to do was not finish the film. It made me want to say, maybe I'm into this Avatar world a little bit more than I thought. I want to go check out the anime. And that's what I'm going to go do. I'm going to go start picking up as much as I can because I haven't watched this film. I found myself wanting to get into the cartoons, the anime, the books, get into that world because I found myself enjoying those concepts in the film. The different nations had me wanting to learn more about who Aang is, who the lead character is. How are these characters portrayed in the actual graphic novels and the all the stories and all the media that they have out there based on this world, on this franchise? It made me want to go do that. So that's a huge positive. That's something I can say about this film. You'll know if you really like this film, if you really want to go get out of this film immediately and go get into the source material that inspired this film. That's what got my juices flowing through this film. I was thinking, I can't wait to get off of here so I can start researching which are the best things to hop into in this world, because it is a very good story. I think the story is really good. It just wasn't executed well at all on film. Is it the worst film I've ever seen? No, not even by a long shot. I think if this was another list based on films like this, I've seen a ton of films based in this type of environment and worlds where you have all these elemental fantasy elements that make this film look like James Cameron's Avatar. You know what I'm saying? It is not a bad film in that regard. It's just, we're talking an M. Night Shyamalan list, so it's dead last. But if you look at other fantasy films out there, it actually is on par with some of the other fantasy films out there. There are dozens and dozens of other fantasy films based on this type of concept that are far worse than this film. So if you're a fantasy person, this is one of the better fantasy films dealing with this type of material. It's just, for me, as somebody who wants the best material out there based on something like this, when you look at this film and you realize that there's no way this film is better than any of the source material it was based on, that is a huge knock to a film like this, because you want to bring stuff like this to the film, and it's supposed to get more people interested in it, not make people run away from it. So that's one reason why I would have to agree with a lot of fanboys who say this movie is an abomination, because it does have people saying things like The Last Airbender sucks, and people are saying, no, the film sucked. This is awesome. Come check this out. And people aren't taking them seriously because all they can think about is this film. And I completely understand that. There are so many things wrong with this film. And again, I don't even want to go into it. There are no spoilers in this. There are nothing like the big M. Night Shyamalan reveal spoilers. There's none of that in this film. It is very predictable. The movie ends. It ends very abruptly, and you realize this film is about to hit credits after that. And you realize, whoa, well, they do, because they have an end credit scene where they try to set up a sequel. And that's what a lot of people's problem was, is that you try to set up a franchise on something that was not working and they knew it when they were filming it. The film, the way that it's edited, that so many things were cut out of this film and chopped up because it just was not film worthy. It just simply wasn't. The stuff that's in this movie, most directors would have left out. This movie should have been 25 minutes long, because I think 30 minutes of this movie is outstanding. And I mean outstanding, truly 100% very good 30 minutes of this film is in there. It's just scattered throughout all of this landscape of mediocrity. But again, the highlight to me is those action sequences. There's an action sequence at the end of this movie where Aang is controlling the water. One of the things, you notice I haven't talked about the story because there isn't one, but one of the things he was trying to do is master the element of water. That was the last thing he had to master. And when he masters it, man, does he master it. It is beautiful. The ending of this film is beautiful. I love it. There are some scenes in the middle. It's just a beautiful film. And here's another little tidbit on here before we get out of here. I watched this movie with my son because I wanted to see what an 8-year-old would think about this movie. And there were probably 2 or 3 times in the film he literally turned to me, looked at me, and shrugged his shoulders up and down like he didn't know what he was looking at and what it was. And I know my son And whenever he shrugs his shoulders, that means he's embarrassed about something. That's his way of conveying, I don't know, I'm embarrassed. And he did that about 2 or 3 times in this film where he just shrugged his shoulders like he was embarrassed for what he was looking at. And that's an indictment, obviously. So, but overall, he actually liked the film. There was just a few scenes in the movie where he was like, oh my God, that's bad. He's 8 years old. But for an 8-year-old, he actually did like the movie. He was, at the end of it, he had his jaw dropped like I think a lot of 8-year-olds would have. I think if I was 8, haven't seen this movie, I think I would love it. I don't think it's a children's film. There's a lot of things in it where you clearly would say that it's not a complete child story. So maybe that's something they should have done. Maybe they should have went more childlike for this one. But it takes itself very seriously. It has a lot of adult themes in it, mixed in with a lot of childlike things. But again, that's an identity problem with this film. But my son liked it. He's 8 years old. I don't really dislike it. It's not something that I would ever really want to watch again. For the purposes of this review, I watched it, but that's about the extent of it. And I'm glad that I did spend a little bit of money on it, because if I would have spent a lot on it just for the review, I would have been disappointed. But at least I'm going to get some more money. It's going to get used quite a bit because my son seemed to like it a little bit. So that's the last one of this series. It's been fun making this M. Night Shyamalan from best to worst films he's directed countdown, as requested by someone a while back. Again, with my channel, if there's a request, I'm going to fulfill it. He wanted to know what my list was. This was my list, my full 10 movie review. If you want to see the other ones, go down in the description box below and check out all 10 of the reviews I did on M. Night Shyamalan's ranked videos of my personal liking, my personal ranked list. So see you guys on the next movie night review. Take care. Be safe.